Wonderkind is a software company, software as a service, or SaaS as the acronym goes. And we are, what we can best be described is a marketing operating system. So we allow marketers at an e-commerce company or a media company or a travel company to be able to deliver one-to-one messages on their site. So think of everything that we do as being almost like a veneer over the client's website. And then if you were to go, Matt, to one of our clients' websites, we would be able to give you one-to-one custom messaging on that site to try to pull you down a conversion funnel. So if you're at, let's say, Uniqlo, one of our clients, and we saw that in the past you had looked at, let's say, sweatshirts, we might create a call to action like, hey, see these new arrivals of sweatshirts, pull you in there, and then, hey, see if your size is in stock, because we know if you look at your size in stock, you're 22% more likely to convert. So we'll get you to just take that micro conversion, and we keep pulling you down that funnel slowly but surely until ultimately you can add a product to cart. And then if you abandon at any point in that journey, even if after you've added something to cart, if you leave the site, if we know that we have permission to send you an email, we'll tell Uniqlo, hey, Uniqlo, send Matt an email, tell him he had looked at these products and here are these other products that go great with it, or these are the products he left in his cart to get you to convert. And so it's these one-to-one messaging at scale on websites through triggered emails. That's considered a trigger email if you conduct a behavior that would then send the email to you, and through text messages as well. That's a fantastic question, by the way. That's a great icebreaker, even just amongst friends, right?
Exactly. It's one of my favorites. So
there's someone in our company who loves to start the icebreakers this way. Whenever we have a client dinner or whatever, I'm gonna have to introduce this one.
There you go.
She's gonna love it. So my parents both worked, and my grandmother lived with me. So oftentimes dinner was myself, perhaps with my two older sisters, and my grandmother, who would make the dinner, and we would probably get started, and then my parents would come home separately because they worked in different roles, different companies. But my dad was a advertising salesman for first Telemundo, which is a Spanish language television station, and then with Univision, and my mom was a teacher. And then after teaching, she then had her own mortgage company. So they would come up different times, and I think I do remember them coming home always pretty stressed. I found it's interesting looking back on it now because I have my own two children, and when I come home, I try to be happy, even though I'm very stressed out, and make sure that I give all to the kids and I don't bring any stress home with me. But I do recall, and I don't mean that to be like in a super sad way, but I do recall there seemed to be stress when they came home. And it just wasn't as bright and jovial. But oftentimes my grandmother was there. She was, I was always very close with her.
And what were some of the things that you guys would cook together?
So my grandmother did most of the cooking. She would do a lot of Cuban food. So I grew up in a Cuban household. Both of my grandmother and both my parents were born and raised in Cuba. They all came over in 1961. So if my grandmother cooked, it was a lot of Cuban food. So things like ropa vieja, which is shredded beef, and croquetas, which is like the fried little mini log looking things. They're rather delicious. Picadillo, which is like ground beef. A lot of meat products. You'll see a pattern in the Cuban food. It is not healthy. Not a whole lot of vegetables. The fact that I didn't have a blood clot yet, I'm kind of shocked. But.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. So I love that you recognized how when your parents came home, that was a feeling that you didn't want to instill in your own life, or now that you're in that same position where your parents were. Do you feel like you've already, or that you've always sort of picked up things on different ways that you wanted to live your own life growing up? Obviously we talked a little bit before this recording started about some of the other things that you've done before in your life, very entrepreneurial. Were there influences, I guess, in your life growing up that hey, I don't want to work for somebody, or I want to go out and do my own thing? Were those types of feelings going through your head pretty early on?
For some reason, I don't know why I picked up on this as a kid, but I always had this fear of my my father losing his job or being let go. And it was almost like an irrational fear. There was not a strong reason why I should have felt that, but I did. I just kind of picked up on it as a kid. And so there was this, let's call it low grade anxiety, even as kids, like, oh, wow, my dad or my parents should be out of a job. And so I think trying to create your own destiny and be your own boss and not be able to just, be laid off is something that's a powerful, that autonomy is very powerful.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate entrepreneurship in that way. Comes at major costs in other areas, of course, as we all know. But there is something to be said about not having that anxiety of, hey, I can be let go at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
And in fact, he was, let go a couple of times, but that was after my low grade anxiety was present about it. So after the fact, sure, that anxiety was perhaps justified, but it wasn't in the early days.
So you're kind of future casting the thing there, but unfortunately you're past that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, I guess, your upbringing. Did you go to college? When did you start your first companies? And I know there's been a couple of them that have been acquired. So talk a little bit about those next steps.
Yeah. So I went to college at Vanderbilt University. And I applied there because one of my older sisters was there. I actually did not want to go to Vanderbilt because my older sister was there.
Yeah.
But when I got my acceptance letter, I'll never forget, I get the acceptance letter from Vanderbilt. And within the acceptance letter is another letter saying, we are pleased to offer you a full tuition scholarship.
Oh, wow.
That's only awarded to 2 incoming students every year. And I turned to my mom, who was right next to me when I was reading it, and she's bawling, right? And we didn't have much money at the time. So basically I figured that made up my decision for me, and I was going to Vanderbilt. So that's where I ended up going to school. It was a great experience. And then graduated from Vanderbilt, moved to New York to join a consulting firm called A.T. I ended up being let go from A.T. Kearney. Look at that, all that low grade anxiety paying off. Just validating that anxiety. And at the time I was dating someone, and she said, why don't we just go backpack the world for a year? I said, let's do it. So I went, it was a month. Actually, we planned this a month before 9/11. We were supposed to fly out 9/12.
Oh, wow.
But because all aircraft was grounded for about a week or 10 days, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
So we didn't leave until somewhere like September 20 something. But then I went backpacking for a year. She ended up breaking up with me a few months later, telling me she wasn't in love with me anymore, and broke my heart. But I continued going and ended up being
still on the road. That's great.
Yeah. Ended up being, arguably one of the best experiences of my life. I made very dear friends that are still some of my best friends today. It was a very defining experience for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's on my list of things to do. I'd love to just, that's the way I travel. I don't bring luggage, whatever can fit in my backpack. That's the way I do it. I get yelled at it for all the time. I just went to a wedding 2 weeks ago. I only brought my backpack, had to,
for you.
Bring the suit and everything and figure it all out. But yeah, no, I love to travel. So I love that you've done that. Very, very
cool.
So
fantastic.
what happened? What happened next? You did your travels, and then coming back, or maybe you even started things when you were still traveling. I don't know.
So came back after that year, and I began working for my dad's company at the time. He had started a concrete company, so I was working with him. And while I was working with him, it was in Miami, which is where I grew up, and my sister was working for my mom's mortgage company, and so it was like just one big family affair type of thing. And I remember, and that was the sister that had gone to Vanderbilt. Yeah. And I said to her one day, because I was looking around Miami, all these people had tattoos, and I thought, well, someday these people are going to regret having all of these tattoos, and they're going to want them removed. So I said, why don't we get into the tattoo removal business, like maybe a laser tattoo removal business? Yeah. And she said to me, she's like, I don't really know anything about laser tattoo removal, but I'll tell you what, a friend of mine in Atlanta named Marshall runs a medical spa where they do laser hair removal, and is doing really, really well. I was like, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. Let me start to do my homework on it. I began to do my homework on it and realized that the reason one of these didn't exist yet in Florida was there was a gray area in the regulation.
Okay.
So medical spas existed in Atlanta, which is where Marshall was. They existed in other parts of the country, like in California and in New York. and there weren't any in Florida or in Miami more specifically. And I thought this is a perfect market for a medical spa. People have disposable income. They're super vain. Sorry for any listeners in Miami. I mean, I was born and raised there, so I feel like I can get away with that kind of comment. You know, their skin is exposed. So yeah, let's get into that business. And my sister and I went into that business. We brought on Marshall as kind of like a co-founder so that we could come in really high on the learning curve. We raised about $120,000 from not even, you know, the terminology is friends and family, but it wasn't friends and family. It was kind of like strangers and strangers, but like third degrees removed. And then we ended up starting the first ever medical spa in Florida called Sutera. And we did really well. I made mistakes, plenty of them. One of them was, you know, we did really well early on in the first few months. Revenue, we got to $60,000 in monthly revenue on month 3.
Nice, yeah.
And part of the reason was our landlord. I'll never get a really wise thing my dad once said to me. So our landlord, we had a nice building where we leased the Sutera, like was one of the units in the building. We were next to a Subway, next to a Payless shoe source, next to a Sprint store. It was a new little strip center right on Highway 1. And on the side of the building was a big blank area. And I asked I spoke to the landlord saying, hey, what's gonna be done with that space? He's like, well, there's not gonna be a tenant in there for a little while. Would you like to hang like a drape, like a billboard over that empty space overlooking Highway 1? I was like, no, we don't want to do it. That's okay. My dad said to me, basically, grabbed me by the ears and said, listen, when somebody offers you free marketing, free advertising, you take it. And so we did that in month 1 or month 2, something like that. And instantly revenue just skyrocketed. Yeah. So that's why by month 3, we were at $60,000 a month in revenue. So anyway, we got there quickly, but I did something very foolish, which was take the money that we've been making and all of a sudden started making distributions to our investors. Yeah. As opposed to keeping the money and growing the business and opening up other locations. Since there was no other show in town but us, we should have opened up half a dozen other locations as fast as we could. Yeah. My ego got in the way and said, no, I want to show these investors, hey, that they made a good bet with me and with us. So here, started making distributions, and it was just a very silly idea because by the end of the year, we had plenty of competition in there just nipping at our heels. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. How quickly do you think you could have scaled? Do you think you could have done 5, plus units that quickly? I mean, I think what we would have had to have raised more money because we wouldn't have had enough free cash flow to have funded that from the operations of the 1 unit. But I think showing those early signals, we could have gone to our existing investors and of course new and larger investors and probably raised, a few $1 million if we were that ambitious and really blown it out and taken a strong hold in that market. Yeah. So I would have done it way differently if I could go back in time. Yeah. And so that business, I believe you said, was acquired at some point, correct? It eventually was. It was acquired in 2011 by a competitive medical spa. Excellent. So then your next jaunt, were you kind of getting burnt out of that business, or sort of getting disenfranchised with it and looking for something else? Yeah, it's interesting. I was eager to get back to New York. Yeah. And so even after just a couple of years of operating the business in there as a manager and all the other competition started coming in, I did start to get kind of fatigued with it and bored with it. And I was ready for something different, something bigger, something to elevate myself in my career. So I applied to Columbia Business School in New York and I got in. So then I ended up going to Columbia Business School. My sister continued to manage that spa while I was in business school. And then while I was away, there was almost like a coup of our employees at that spa, like a coup against my sister as the manager. Wow. And unfortunately, it was bad. They were all going to basically walk out. Yeah. And it was tough because when I'm getting real, kind of intimate here. I hope that's okay. But absolutely. When I left to go to New York, my sister felt like betrayed. She felt like I was leaving her, right? Even though I was going on to what I felt was the right move for me and all that, she just felt like I was leaving her behind. And so there was some strain in our relationship for a period of time. And in the midst of that strained relationship, the employees at the spa were basically, having a coup against her.
Yeah.
And so I ultimately, believe it or not, had no choice but to fire my sister,
Wow.
who I'm in a strained relationship with,
Yeah.
while I'm in New York, and she's pregnant.
Oh,
I mean,
geez.
it's just crazy.
Wow.
It was a dark time. We got past it, but
Yeah.
man, that was not fun at all.
That is
Yeah.
incredible. Wow.
It was horrible. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
but the entire business, like the business would have just gone kaput.
Yeah.
It was a really dire time. We did our best to take measures before, of course, needing to fire her, but ultimately that was what needed to happen.
Yeah.
And she was, the reality of the situation is she ultimately then was tired of managing it as well and wanted to
Yeah.
change. I think she would have liked to have left, of course, on her own terms, clearly, like most people would.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was tough.
That's a tough one, man. I
Yeah.
don't know that I've ever heard of the founder having to fire a sister in those.
Tough.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you've started a couple other businesses. They've been acquired as well. So you've done this a number of times, and then now you're at Wonderkind, and Wonderkind was, you were basically brought on to build a business unit within Wonderkind. I guess talk a little bit about what Wonderkind is, and then what your specific business unit is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Wonderkind is a software company, software as a service, or SaaS, as the acronym goes. And we are, what we can best be described is a marketing operating system. So we allow marketers at an e-commerce company or a media company or a travel company to be able to deliver one-to-one messages on their site. So think of everything that we do as being almost like a veneer over the client's website. And then if you were to go, Matt, to one of our clients' websites, we would be able to give you one-to-one custom messaging on that site to try to pull you down a conversion funnel. So if you're at, let's say, Uniqlo, one of our clients, and we saw that in the past you had looked at, let's say, sweatshirts, we might create a call to action like, hey, see these new arrivals of sweatshirts, pull you in there, and then, hey, see if your size is in stock, because we know if you look at your size in stock, you're 22% more likely to convert. So we'll get you to just take that micro conversion, and we keep pulling you down that funnel slowly but surely until ultimately you can add a product to cart. And then if you abandon at any point in that journey, even if after you've added something to cart, if you leave the site, if we know that we have permission to send you an email, we'll tell Uniqlo, hey, Uniqlo, send Matt an email, tell him he had looked at these products, and here are these other products that go great with it, or these are the products he left in his cart to get you to convert. And so these one-to-one messaging at scale on websites through triggered emails, that's considered a trigger email if you conduct a behavior that would then send the email to you, and through text messages as well.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. We're a 700-person company, growing 40-50% a year, doing 9 figures in revenue, and hoping to, potentially IPO at some point in the next 12 to 24 months. So it's going really well.
So the initial, I guess, pop-up, if you will, or the initial notification that the person gets. Is there a way that you're like looking to see, like, is there a cookie that you're basically tapping into that says, oh, that this person likes this, and this, so you should show them this, or how does that work? So
we do leverage cookies, and cookies supplement our own identification capabilities, which, I can't get too much into it, not out of any concern, but frankly, because it's out of my wheelhouse. There are like non-PII, non-personally identifiable signals that we can go off of to create what we call a BXID, which is our own identifier, and then it allows us to basically refresh a cookie, and it's basically like refreshing like a first-party cookie is what it is.
Interesting. Yeah.
So then, when you arrive to the site, we're able to say, hey, do we, in the session, do we know, can we send this individual? We never know it's your name, Matt, or anything. We don't know anything about you. We just know, for this device browser combination, what have you, which is associated to a BXID, do we have permission to send them an email? And
Yeah.
if the answer is no, we actually will try to get that permission while you're on Uniqlo's site. Like, hey, sign up to receive future
That
deals.
is incredibly powerful. Yeah, that
Yeah,
is
it's
really
really, really powerful.
And would you say that Wonderkind, you said that it obviously works with e-commerce type brands, but is there any specific verticals or anything like that that you guys specialize in, or is it pretty well agnostic?
The e-commerce was how we grew so much, and it's our bread and butter. But we've expanded certainly into media companies like publishers. I oversee that business of selling our SaaS offering, and we have an advertising product. I can speak to that in just a second. We sell into B2B companies. We sell into travel companies. We're starting to get into CPG and healthcare. So yeah, it's certainly other verticals that we've been expanding into. But cool. E-commerce still comprises the majority of our client base.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah, so you were brought into Wonderkind to build a specific vertical, which it sounds like you kind of just alluded to what that was. So talk a little bit about what your vertical is that you've had such great success, and you've done, just to kind of preface this, you've built this very, very quickly up to about 50 million in about 5 years. So
that's right. So it's interesting. So before Wonderkind was named Wonderkind, we were called Bounce X. And before we were Bounce X, we were called Bounce Exchange. And I've known our founder and CEO, his name is Ryan Urban, absolute brilliant product visionary. I've known him for a long time, even before he started the company. And he told me his idea for the company, his idea for Bounce Exchange, which is, hey, all these media sites, these otherwise known as publishers, all these publishers have high bounce rates, 50, 60% bounce rates. Sure. And that traffic isn't of much value to these publishers. So he was saying, how neat would it be if I could create this technology that could detect when someone's going to bounce from the site, and then we can put a high impact ad in front of them to generate some good revenue for the publisher from that bouncing traffic. And lo and behold, he went and built that. But in the early days, they got into speaking, for some reason, not so much with publishers, but with e-commerce companies. E-commerce companies were saying, hey, this is neat technology. You can detect if someone's leaving my site, and then you put this big message in front of them. They're like, we don't show ads. So can we just use that technology, use that real estate to capture their email addresses or get them to convert with whatever's in their cart? And sure enough, they started to sign on a lot of these e-commerce companies. And so that's why e-commerce was the direction that the company headed. Got it. But, Ryan, the company that started in like 2012, 2013 had grown meaningfully. And then in 2016, Ryan and I spoke again. He said, look, I think I want to revisit this ads conversation, revisit the ad product. Can you come in and help us build it? At the time, the company was 160 people, which for me is like massive, right? Like I'm way early. I'm a 0 to 1 type of guy. So I'm like, wow, you guys are pretty big already. I'm not sure if it's for me. He's like, yeah, but you're going to really be able to build out your own business here within the company. And so I took the plunge, and that was over 5 years ago. And it's gone phenomenally well. So what that ad product is, it's different than any other ad on the internet. So every ad on the internet, when you arrive at a publisher's website, let's say you were to arrive at the New York Times, well, they have ads on the side rail or between paragraphs or whatever, just trying to distract you and steal your attention away from the article that you came there to read. We think that's a negative user experience. We think that when you arrive at a publisher site, you clicked on that link or you arrived there for a reason, right? There was an itch that needed to be scratched, whether you wanted to be informed, entertained, inspired, whatever. So we want to let you do that. We believe, hey, let that visitor scratch that itch. Only when they're finished should you then render an ad in front of them. So we have in market the only behaviorally triggered ads in the world, which is we can detect when you've finished consuming that article, finished consuming that content. Only then will we put an ad in front of you. And it's a two-sided business. So on the one side, we have publishers, media companies that have adopted these ad formats. And they serve as the supply side of the business. And on the other side, the demand side of the business, are the advertisers and brands who want to get their message in front of people in this user-friendly way. And it turns out, and I guess it's not mind-blowing. Turns out that in fact, if you wait until somebody's finished consuming content before you put an ad in front of them, they're way more likely to engage with that ad. They're more receptive to that ad. And if they engage with it, they're more likely to take a downstream action, such as
Yeah.
completing a contact form looking at a product page, adding a product to cart, even a full-blown conversion, right? Because they have finished doing what they went to that publisher's page to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really cool. And then, so when you bring on additional advertisers, are there certain verticals that you have a relationship with for the publishers so that you can say, okay, if Mr. whatever e-commerce person, this is your niche, we've got the ability to be able to show your ads on this page, this page, this page. Is that kind of how you're able to sell that to that side of things? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So we always disclose our full publisher list, and we have about 250 domains that have our ads running on them right now as we speak. There's about 250 domains, and these are big domains. CNN, Weather, Sports Illustrated, Dictionary, Thesaurus, like huge publishers. And so we always disclose that, and also the advertisers, the buyers, are able to select which domains their ads.
Oh, cool! Very cool.
Yeah. Now, of course, if they select, too few domains, then if they're looking to spend $10,000 a day, well, you can't whittle down that list to just a few domains. You need to have some sort of minimum threshold of domains there.
Yep. Yeah, that is really, really cool. So, and say we're on CNN. Is there any type of customization to show an ad based on whatever the content is on that page that might be complementary to whatever it is that I'm advertising?
So we don't power that ourselves. It is possible, and without getting too geeked out on how these ads are delivered, and it's all done programmatically through DSPs, which is demand side platforms, which advertisers use, and SSPs, which is supply side platforms, which publishers use. And those two types of platforms typically communicate, and they layer on different types of data and targeting. So they could potentially do contextual targeting, such as what you suggested, but we don't get involved in any of that data we don't inform the bid stream. We don't add any information into it. We just simply say, hey, there's an ad to be shown on this website, SSP and DSP. You guys do your magic and determine who wants to show an ad there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So when you stepped into this role to build this this other vertical, what were some of the challenges that you were running into, and how did you overcome those? I mean, obviously, again, growing that quickly, and I'm assuming that you probably had some assets that were already in place, but what were some of those early challenges that you were sort of struggling with?
I'd say, for one, I knew very little, if anything, about programmatic advertising. I had to come in and just ask all the dumb questions and look foolish and get smart and read up as much as I could, attend conferences. I knew very little. I'm still by no means an expert. I'll be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
And that's why you hire people that that are,
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
So I came in just real novice, needing to learn a lot. So that was one thing that was a challenge in the early days. And then the other thing is just whenever you're building a business unit within a much larger company, you're always going to need to justify your existence a bit and justify the need for resources, right? Because you're somewhat of an afterthought, frankly. You're not the core reason for existence, or for the company's existence. You need to just remind them, hey, and sell them the vision. This is what we can become. And it's a slow go. Be patient. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. I remember there were conversations, and even in the first year and a half, 2 years, I wasn't privy to these, but I was told about them, that certain executives were saying, hey, do we want to keep investing in this advertising business? And our CEO, Ryan, said, absolutely, I believe in it. And thank goodness. I mean, he was right. We're generating really strong revenues at really nice margins, and it's growing just incredibly fast. So it's a meaningful part of the company. It's still, we're still not 50% of the company's revenue.
Sure.
We're well into double digits of the company's revenue. So it is meaningful.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you made me realize too, you've done a lot of selling of yourself, and now you're sort of not necessarily selling yourself, but you're selling inside the company to obviously support your vertical that you're that you're leading. Where do you think your sales capability, or that type of approach came from? Because again, you're obviously very successful with being able to, pitch and sell, your ideas yourself, your, whatever that vision may be.
I think I connect well with people. And I think I consider myself emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent. So I'm able to connect with people on that level. And so and it's not in any, it's just not, I mean, I am like that in my personal life. I've always been that way. It's just, I love people and I love being around people. I'm your typical like extrovert, outgoing person. And I do care about people deeply. So I think I'm able to sell them on that and get them to want to see me succeed and to want to help me because I like them and they like me, right? Not everybody likes me. There's certainly plenty of people that don't. Let's be crystal clear. But for the most part, especially where it matters, people do tend to like me. And I would say in the early days too, one of the challenges is, the folks on our team also felt like the black sheep in the company. And so I think managing those emotions of like, you're still vital to this company. You're very important and we're going to build something big together. Just like hang with us. Because if they're not feeling that love from the rest of the company, I need to be providing that love to that team. And so for the first, several years, that was the case, was like, let's hang in there. We're getting there. Unfortunately now, actually some people still feel like we don't fully get, I don't necessarily agree with these folks, but some people on my team still don't think we fully get the attention or resources or love that we deserve. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think those are just, I think that's scar tissue from the early days, to be honest.
That could be. And it's, again, interesting, kind of bringing it full circle again. You are very in tune with people's feelings and emotions. I mean, even, again, going back to when you were a kid, having that, sort of that intuition of, this is the way that my parents are walking in the door and feeling, and, now you're able to pick that up in your team members too, and you're being able to support that. So really, really, really cool that, you're able to, identify and pull those types of things out and then act on them as well. So
thank you.
Very, very cool. So if people want to learn more about Wonderkind, or is your division part of Wonderkind? Is that all one platform?
It is part of Wonderkind. So if our website needs a bit of an overhaul, so I will apologize a little bit in advance. We need to revamp it, but our website is wunderkind.co, and Wonderkind is WUNDERKIND, wunderkind.co. And my email, if anyone wants to contact me, I'm more than happy to chat with anybody about this kind of stuff. I'm Andress, which is ANDRES at wunderkind.co.
Yeah, this is really cool. I've never heard of this type of technology. So very, very cool.
We're behind the scenes oftentimes. Like, I don't know if you remember that. I'm kind of dating myself, but maybe you'll remember this. Remember that commercial back in the day of BASF, and they would say, we don't make a lot of the products. We make a lot of the products you use better. That's basically what we are. We don't make the sites that you go to. We just make them better for you.
And that's interesting. Again, I think that's kind of, there a lot of the platforms that are out there out front, obviously you've heard of all of those, but you're sort of the secret sauce behind a lot of the success of, these. So I kind of almost see it as, the phantom, these things, these tools that people are so successful with, but you guys, aren't out front. So a lot of people don't necessarily know about them. So that's exactly really, really cool. Yeah, I love it. Excellent. Andress, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys, maybe we'll see out on the ringing the bell one of these days.
Oh, from your lips to God's ears. That'd be very exciting. Thank you.
I love it. Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, Matt. Thank you.